This video is brought to you by John Robson Guitar Tuition. If you enjoy the content, please consider supporting the channel by enrolling on a course, purchasing some guitar lessons or a t-shirt, or you can join my Patreon. Now, on with the show. Hello chaps, welcome once again to John Robson Guitar Tuition. As always, I do hope you're well. Okay, so it's Wednesday, so that means that we are looking at chord progressions once again, part of this ongoing series of videos that I'm putting into this Wednesday slot. And yes, let's talk about ugly chords, shall we? Like many people, when I was like many guitarists, I suppose, when I was a young fledgling guitar player, I acquired a chord dictionary. It might have been this one. I certainly had a copy of this at some point. But anyway, at some point I had a chord dictionary that was moderately useful, I suppose. It showed me how to play this chord or that chord that was required for a song that I might have been learning or whatever. But the one thing that always puzzled me about these kind of books was the fact that they would have some really ugly, awful, nasty, downright useless, so I thought, sounding chords in them. Diminisheds and augmenteds and minor 7 flattened fifths and stuff like that. And, you know, you'd kind of, just out of curiosity every now and again, you'd mangle your fingers into one of these shapes and then strum it and you'd think, that sounds hideous. I cannot conceive in any way, shape or form any situation where I would want to be able to play that chord. What piece of music, what tuneful, pleasant, you know, enjoyable musical sensation would require something that sounds as ugly as that? And I suspect, based upon conversations with my students, that that is not an uncommon reaction to the sound of some of these chords when you try them in isolation. The key thing is that you need to hear them in context. Context is all when it comes to these kinds of chords. And now I want to show you how they can be of use to you in songwriting and maybe as well learning to recognize them so you can figure out other people's songs that use them, you know. Anyway, here's the deal when it comes to using ugly chords in a pleasant sounding piece of music. Okay then, let's begin with minor 7 flat 5 chords. Here's one. This is B minor 7 flat 5. And not a pretty sound, it has to be said. Where in the name of all that's holy could you use that chord in any kind of pleasant or satisfying sounding chord sequence? Well, I'll show you. Basically, a chord like this, its function is to provide tension. It's the very ugliness of that chord which is going to make the chord or chords that come after it sound better and more resolved, you know, as a result. So, for example, you know, you may be well acquainted, I'm sure, with this kind of chord change where you've got an E7 going into an A minor. Okay, we hear that kind of thing all the time. It's a standard kind of staple of the songwriting toolbox. So here's an idea. Hey, try this. Try playing B minor 7 flat 5, going into the E7, then going to A minor. Suddenly that chord doesn't sound quite so bad now. You can hear it's taking you on a journey towards the destination, which is A minor. See how that works? It's still an ugly sounding chord, but it's, you know, progressing you towards the A minor, the resolution point. And what you've done there, if you do that, is you've used the 2 and the 5 chord from the key of A harmonic minor. You can see B minor 7 flat 5 is chord 2 in that key, and E7 is chord 5, and then you land on chord 1. And that's a general rule, by the way. We'll probably look at this in a later video. Anytime you want to land on a specified tonality and resolve to an A minor chord, for instance, in this case, just use the 2 and the 5 chords from that key. It works in major as well. In the key of A major, you would have B minor would be your 2 chord, E7 would still be your 5 chord, and A major, your 1 chord, and you can hear that that works perfectly well to resolve onto that A major chord. Anyway, back to our ugly chords. That is how you can use a B minor 7 flat 5 chord, or just a minor 7 flat 5 chord, like that. Okay. Next up, let's take a look at the diminished 7th chord. Here's a diminished 7th chord right here. And ain't that an ugly sound as well? That's not a pretty sound at all. But once again, its job is to be an ugly sounding chord, which adds tension to the chord sequence. And once again, you can see that that chord there, that's a G sharp diminished 7th. That is the 7 chord in the key of A harmonic minor. And this will sound perfectly resolved if you take it up to the A minor chord. Listen. Okay, there's your tension. There's your cliffhanger in the movie plot. And there's your resolution. It makes that chord that you end up on sound sweeter and more resolved as a result of the ugliness of that chord. In case you're starting to think, well, yes, but this is only going to be something that you'll find in some kind of jazz kind of, or fusion kind of complicated, style of music. Well, would you call Noel Gallagher a jazz musician? He used that very chord change in Don't Look Back in Anger. The part of the song where I'm going to try and sing it, but it's stand up beside the fireplace, take that look from off your face. What you've got there is a G going to a G sharp diminished 7th, going to an A minor in the B section of Don't Look Back in Anger. So, these kind of chords crop up in, rock and pop and blues and, anything, any style of music, really. You're not just going to be restricted to using them in, jazz or fusion or something like that. Now, the other interesting thing about a diminished chord, a diminished 7th chord, is that it's what we call a symmetrical chord. If I just go through the notes in this chord, you will see that we've got a G sharp note there, a D note here on the 5th string, another G sharp on the 4th string, a B note on the 3rd string, an F note on the 2nd string, and another G sharp up there. So we've basically got 4 notes. If we place them in ascending order, you've got G sharp, B, D and F. Let's look at how far apart those notes are. There's a G sharp note there, 1st fret on the G string. Now to go from G sharp to B, it's 3 frets. To go from B to the next note in the chord, D, that's also 3 frets. And to go from the D note to the next note in the chord, which is F, that's also 3 frets. And then to get from the F back to a G sharp again up here at the 13th fret, that's also 3 frets. So you can take this chord shape here, and if you move it up the neck 3 frets, 1, 2, 3, like that, every note in the chord has moved up to another note in the same chord. Move another 3, or back down. That is what we call a symmetrical chord. It's a chord which moves at which repeats itself at a regular interval. And you could call that a G sharp diminished 7th. And when you move it up there, it's still a G sharp diminished 7th, or you could think of it as a B diminished 7th, because B is now the lowest note. And so on, up at the 10th fret, the D note, that note there is the lowest note, and you could call it a D diminished 7th. Doesn't really matter what you call it as a guitar player, because essentially what is going to define which one of those chords it is the root note that your bass player is putting on underneath it. But this does have, a kind of an interesting effect. We've seen how the G sharp diminished 7th sounds good going up to an A minor. Incidentally, that will also sound good going up to an A major. You can hear that resolves perfectly well. But if this chord resolves every 3 frets, repeats rather every 3 frets, then that's the same chord down there at the 1st fret. Okay, so that will resolve up to that chord just as easily. You know, or from there. Listen. Again, beautiful sense of tension and resolution. Okay, that is what the value that you get from these chords, and that is especially powerful there because it's a great way of changing to a new key or tonality. This is something I discovered many years ago when I was playing in a cabaret band, and we used to do lots of medleys, basically as a way of keeping people on the dance floor, don't give them a chance to go and sit down. And you know, quite often you've got a song that finishes you know, in A minor, like that, and you want to start, and it has to morph seamlessly into the next song, which is in F sharp major. You know, that to that is not a comfortable chord change, but if you go, that gets you there much more smoothly. So that is how you can use diminished seventh chords. Let's go back to the key of A harmonic minor again, and you can see that the 3 chord in the key of A harmonic minor is C augmented, like that. I always think of augmented chords as being Chuck Berry's other intro, because every Chuck Berry song either has this intro or it has this intro, and that is an augmented chord. Anyway, C augmented. Once again, let's have a look at what notes we've got in this chord. It's a C note, an E note, a G sharp note, and then back to a C note again. Okay, let's map those notes out. There's a C note there, up to the next note in the chord E, that's there, that's 4 frets above the C. Then up to the G sharp note, that's 4 frets above the E, and then back to the C note, that's 4 frets above the G sharp. So augmented chords are also symmetrical. The only difference between them and diminished seventh chords is that augmented chords repeat every 4 frets. So like that. And therefore C augmented is the same chord effectively as E augmented. Okay, and what that means is if you want to go to an A minor chord, maybe you're preceding that A minor chord with an E seventh, and that's perfectly fine. If you just want to spice it up a little bit, play E augmented rather than E7, like this. Again, same kind of tension and release. You've got this ugliness here, and then you've got the resolution here. And, you know, once again, that works just as well going to a major chord. Here's E augmented, going to A major. That is, I think, a really nice little resolution there, like that. And again, you can use the augmented chords as a kind of gateway to another tonality. For instance, if we think that E augmented is the same thing as C augmented, well, we've just shown that E augmented can go to A major. C augmented can go to F major in exactly the same way. So use, if you're in the key of A, landing on an A chord like that, go to your E augmented, and then that will bridge you beautifully into a brand new world of chords centered around F. So that's, again, just a little benefit that you can do. You can kind of use these almost as like portals into other key universes. And that is how you can use these ugly sounding chords, minor 7 flat 5s, diminished sevenths and augmenteds, you know, in polite society, a way of kind of making, you know, a chord sequence work just by adding a little bit of tension in there. Coming up next, I'm going to play you a little sample piece of music that uses all of these tricks, and you can hear just what all of these chord changes sound like in a sort of a real world situation. Here it is. So there you go, and there is of course a full tab for that little kind of strummy thing that I was doing there, showing how those chords all can sit in a, you know, in a piece of music that doesn't sound ugly as a result of using ugly chords. I'll put a backing track up on Patreon as well, which will just be, you know, pretty much that whole arrangement minus the strummy part that you saw me play there. And there is of course, the chord dictionary that I'm putting up each time with these chord sequence lessons. So if you want to know how to play, you know, a minor 7 flat 5 or an augmented or whatever, then you will find it in that chord dictionary. And that clip that you've just seen there of me explaining everything and then playing that piece of music, that's all up there as well, up on my Patreon page. There's the address, and the link is of course in the description, as are all the links to all the other ways that you can help support the channel. Thank you so much to everybody who's helping me do that, and thank you in advance if you're thinking about doing it. Don't forget the Friday live stream, 5 PM UK time on Friday. Great way to kick off the weekend. We're just going to sit around and have a few beers and talk about music and guitars and whatever else crops up. It's a great way to kick off the weekend. As I say, I'd love to see you there if you can make it. But for now, that's all I've got for you today, folks. Hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell if you haven't already done so, and why not give me a like while you're at it. But for now, I'll bid you all a good day and say thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your time. Look after yourselves, folks. Stay well, stay safe, and above all, stay sane. Bye for now.